Chapter 4, China. So this chapter we're going to be talking about Chinese art history. So this is a long amount of time and a vast amount of space that we're going to try to condense into this chapter. Confucianism. Confucianism is a group of ethical principles. Confucianism was started by Confucius, who was born in 551 BC. He had actually served in several minor government posts, managing stables, keeping books for granaries. He married a woman of a similar background when he was 19. He started teaching in his 30s, and it's his teachings that we're going to really be talking about. He developed these concepts about education, society, government, but these principles that he was teaching did not sit well with the king's inner circle. So by the age of 56, he realized that he needed to leave the country. He was in self-imposed exile for 12 years. When he was 67, he returned home to teach and died in 479 at the age of 73. Confucius himself considered himself a transmitter of these ideas, not an originator. The philosophy is that the spirit ancestors had access to the wisdom of the gods, the respect for age, morality, authority, and he was just accessing this wisdom. He regarded heaven as a positive and personal force in the universe. This is a very optimistic view of human nature and potential. There are about 5 to 6 million adherents to Confucianism today. Chan Buddhism is a school of Buddhism that's combined with Taoism, which we'll talk about in a moment. Chan Buddhism originated in a Shaolin temple, and its founder was an Indian prince named Bodhidharma, or as he was known to the Chinese, Da Mao. It was characterized by a rejection of much of the protocol associated with other sects of Buddhism, and is oriented around meditation. So in Chan Buddhism, the temple is everywhere, and you can pray anywhere, meditate in any position. It emphasizes the idea of personal awakening and understanding. Chan Buddhism is the spiritual parent, if you will, of Japanese Zen Buddhism, which we will talk about in the next chapter. Chan Buddhism seeks a harmony with spirit of nature. Taoism. Now, this is either spelled Taoism or Daoism. Either is appropriate. Tao is the way. It's the ultimate creative principle of the universe. All things are united and connected in the Tao, or the way. It is a religion that unifies opposites, the yin and the yang, which is why we have this symbol up right now. The yin-yang sees the world as filled with complementary forces, action, non-action, light, dark, hot, cold. You need one to have the other. Tao is not a god and is not worshipped. Taoism promotes achieving harmony or unity with nature, the pursuit of spiritual immortality, being virtuous, and self-development. Taoists practice meditation, feng shui, as well as the reading and chanting of scriptures. The yin-yang symbol is the principle of natural and complementary forces, that patterns and things depend on one another and do not make sense on their own. In the yin-yang, opposites are not at war, but in harmony. You notice that the dark spot contains a spot of light and vice versa. The two opposites are intertwined and bound together within a unifying circle. There is an ebb and flow that is balanced. Feng shui is the harmonizing everyone with the surrounding environment. Feng shui literally translates as wind, water. This is the idea that there are invisible forces that bind the universe, earth, and humanity together, known as qi. People and nature are linked in invisible dialogue, and lines of energy have power to influence lives of people near them. Qi literally translates as breath, air, or gas. It's the life force or energy flow. We're going to be talking a lot about the Chinese Silk Road. This is the main way that goods, as well as ideas, were transmitted from China into the West and vice versa. I like this map because it kind of gives you some visual idea of some of the objects that you find in these areas. So it's not just pieces coming from one specific part of China. It's all over China, and again, going into the West. We're going to start with the Shang Dynasty. This is a ding It's a ceremonial food vessel. So whenever we look at this bronze vessel, you'll notice it's not huge height. It's a little over 8 inches tall. But one thing I want to really focus in on is this right here, this decorative element. This is called a tattoo. A tattoo is an ogre mask. It represents gods and monsters, guardians that protect people from evil spirits. It's a little bit easier to see in this drawing. So this is what we're talking about here. And here we're breaking this down. So what we have is a face of this ogre that's been broken down into various shapes, and then they've kind of moved a little bit. As you can see that we've got things like a tail and feather over onto the side. We still have, again, eyes here. We can kind of see the eyes and the mouth, but some of the other body parts are kind of around. This can also be read as two profile faces. You can see it almost as a profile face here and here, one on the left, one on the right, with this band coming down the center. Or it can be read as one single face head on. These are some of the pieces that we have in our collection. We have a gui, we have a zhu, and a gu. So the gu is the wine cup, as well as the zhu is also a libation or wine cup. The gui is the bowl, the lidded bowl that you see there. And now closing in, we can actually see that we have a tattoo on our cup here. So we actually do have, whenever we zero in, that we have that tattoo. Again, this is protecting you from evil spirits. And here you can see some of the other decorative elements. All right, so here we have one part of the tattoo on one side and then one on the other. This is a little more separated than most, but we still have it there. And here we have, again, another tattoo image. Again, we've got the eyes, we've got those horns, we've got the mouth, and then things over on the sides will be more like arms, legs, feathers, claws, things like that. This is in the Shou dynasty, Z-H-O-U, Shou. The Shou conquered the Shang dynasty around 1045, 1050 BC. The Chinese economy is slowly transformed from an agricultural hunting society into a more hierarchical society with priests and scholarly authorities. This is a yu. This is, again, intertwining some of these different elements, human and animal forms. And again, we have another tattoo here. We've got the eyes, we've got those horns. You've got the face there. This is a zooming in on the gui that we have at the museum that is from the Shou dynasty. And you can see this wonderful animal face at the end of one of the handles. So this is a plaque with interlaced dragons and birds. And it's made out of jade. I know this is a black and white image, so it doesn't show very well. But jade is a very important material. And this actually started with Confucius. He's saying that the different characteristics of jade make up different qualities. So the gleaming surface equals benevolence, the luminous quality, knowledge, the unwielding nature, uprightness, and intelligence. So that jade is representing truthfulness and moral leadership. And these are some images of some beautiful carved jade pieces. So you can see that wonderful light green color. Now we go into the Qin dynasty, Qin. Now, one of the things that we have to talk about is, of course, the Great Wall. This was started by feudal lords in the 5th century BC and expanded by Qin Shi Huangdi to keep out the Mongolian horsemen to the north. The walls were originally built of rammed earth constructed using forced labor. By 212 BC, ran from Gangsao to the coast of southern Manchuria. And one thing you will notice in this diagram is, first of all, the Great Wall isn't just one wall. And second of all, we have a lot of different building movements. So we will have construction at certain times, and then There won't be construction for several hundred years, and then there's more construction. That's what I want you to get from this slide. So now we're going to spend a lot of time here at the tomb of Emperor Ch4 Probably have heard of his tomb thanks to the find of these wonderful terracotta figures. These are all life-size. Yingzhen took the throne in 246 BC at the age of 13. By 221 BC, he had unified a collection of warring kingdoms and took the name Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of Qin. During his rule, he standardized coins, weights, and measures. He interlinked the states with canals and roads, and is credited for building the first version of the Great Wall. According to writings of the court historian Xiang Qian, during the following Han Dynasty, Qin ordered the mausoleum's construction shortly after taking the throne. More than 700,000 laborers worked on the project, which was halted in 209 BC. Amid uprisings after his death. So this was found in 1974 while some villagers were digging a well. Authorities were brought in, and scientists using remote sensing, ground-penetrating radar, and core sampling have revealed that the tomb complex is very large. It's almost 38 square miles. So over 700,000 workers spent 36 years to create these 600 feet high mounds. There are underground rooms, streams, ceilings represent the heavens. It is a wonderful place. It is also a very horrific place, as the workmen were entombed when the emperor died. The emperor's coffin and his burial articles were placed inside. When the palace was shut down, workmen were still working on it. Within seconds, they were all entombed along with the emperor and became burial sacrifices. There were booby traps set for anyone who tried to rob the grave. So yes, just directly out of Indiana Jones here, we have booby traps with automatically ejected arrows. This was, of course, to deter robbers. There are several pits or excavation sites. The first one has 6,000 soldiers, and this was the original one discovered in 1974. Pit 2 has 1,400 chariots, some inlaid with gold and silver. There's bronze horses, archers, infantrymen, cavalry, and 7,000 warriors. In Pit 3, we have elite special forces. There's only 68 warriors, but they all have intact weapons. So each of these clay figures weigh 300 to 400 pounds and stand 6 feet high. Legs and feet form a solid base, but the rest of each figure is hollow. Torso, arms, hands, and heads were all molded separately, then attached. They were covered with a fine layer of clay, which was later finished with detailed work. Carriages have around 3,400 parts each and were driven by 4 horses. You can see the extent of this is, again, one of the pits. You can see some of the horses there. So there was a survey done because they thought that these faces looked very individualized. So team members randomly picked 30 terracotta warriors, photographed the left side of their heads from a distance. You can see it's kind of hard to tell on some of these. And they then digitally analyzed these photos. And they revealed that no 2 ears in the small sample group were exactly the same. So we have a lot of individualization here. Each armorer was held accountable for what he produced. So we see that the arrowheads are actually slightly different, that they bore chiseled symbols akin to the maker's mark. Lances, halberds, and swords carried detailed inscriptions that recorded the year they were made, the names of each person in the chain of command responsible for their manufacture. After analyzation, there are 8 different facial types, 25 different beard facial hair combinations. 85 different sculptors have been identified. Heads were attached last. They were originally brightly painted. Paint actually flaked off some of the really early excavations. There are several layers of lacquer over the terracotta. Then paint mixed with animal glue goes on top. So now you can see some of the different facial features, including the facial hair there, beard, mustache, goatee. So you can see the different facial features. So this is how the warriors were made. Again, they are entirely made out of clay, and then the part of the painting process does involve lacquer. So again, this is another very helpful diagram showing how these are made. And this shows the brightly colored paints that were used. Again, the early excavations, paint just flaked off as soon as the air hit these, but they've actually been able to conserve some of these later ones. And so we actually know these bright colors that were used. So here's one where the paint is still preserved. So we have different types of warriors. We have officers, soldiers, charioteers, and cavalry. So this is the whole layout of the entire complex. So one of the things that keeps us from fully excavating the site is the very high amount of mercury. And this has to do with the fact that there was a story that in the main tomb that there was this river of mercury. People thought that this was over-exaggeration, that this was just eloquence, but no, this is actually probably true because the soil above the burial mound of the tomb contains a high amount of mercury. So they will not be excavating into the main tomb for quite a long time. Shui Hangdi was obsessed with living forever, so he was said to have consumed wine and honey laden with cinnabar, thinking this would prolong his life. However, this actually probably hastened his death. One of the emperor's many sons actually conspired with the chief eunuch to murder his oldest brother, the emperor's presumed heir, to seize the throne for himself. Some of the skeletons that were found, there were quite a few around in this complex, were found with artifacts belonging to the royal family. These are mostly males, and they are thought to be the deceased emperor's sons. One of the skulls was split by a metal bolt from a crossbow, likely at close range. So they think that these young princes would have been executed by the ambitious older brother who was trying to secure the throne for himself. Sima Qian, the new emperor, brother that conspired, killed many of his father's concubines as well. He did this in order to keep one of them who might have been pregnant by his father from possibly giving birth to someone who could take over the throne. Unfortunately, Qian's rule only lasted 3 years. The main funerary mound, the interior, according to the writings, we have an image of the cosmos on the sky. And again, rivers and streams filled with mercury, and hills and mountains made of bronze. From these writings, we can envision a magical place in the interior. Here's another image of the whole complex. So you can see the emperor's tomb is the main area. That's the part where there have been no excavations thanks to the high level of mercury. We do know that we have burials of workers over here. We also, again, have all these various areas where we have excavated and found statues and sculptures. There's, again, lots of different skeletons surrounding as well. So here are some skeletons here. Here's where they think those that believe to be the other sons were murdered. Here's a 4-horse chariot and driver. You can see all the intricate detail work on this. Here's a close-up of the same image.